everyone, Martina Bex here from the Comprehensible classroom. Today we're going to talk about circling. Circling is a communicative technique. It's a part of how you communicate with your students. In the same way that you control your rate of speech, sometimes speaking more quickly, sometimes slowing down in order to help your students understand, so do you circle. When I first ditched my textbook and switched over to comprehension-based teaching, which at the time was just TPRS, I was taught to circle, and this is how I was taught to do it. Step 1, make a statement. For example, Brandon wants a dog. Step 2, ask a yes question. Does Brandon want a dog? So you're asking a question about the same statement, and it's a question to which students would answer yes. Step 3, after students respond, affirm the original statement. Yes, Brandon wants a dog. Restate the original statement. Now, pick one part of the statement and ask questions about it. For example, focus on the subject, the verb, or the object. First, we'll focus on the object. First, ask a no question. Does Brandon want a cat? A no question is a question to which the answer is no. And we know that Brandon doesn't want a cat. The original statement was that Brandon wants a dog. So asking a no question is asking a question to which the answer is no. Does Brandon want a cat? Wait for students to answer and then make a twofer. A twofer statement is where you negate the incorrect understanding and then you affirm the correct understanding. No, Brandon does not want a cat. Brandon wants a dog. Next, ask an either-or question. In this case, does Brandon want a cat or does Brandon want a dog? You don't have to use the same two variables throughout the whole thing. You could compare Brandon wanting a dog to Brandon wanting a hamster. But if you use the same two variables over and over, it's giving students repeated exposure to those two things, and it's really helpful. Then, after students respond, make another twofer. It's obvious. Brandon does not want a cat. Brandon wants a dog. Then ask a W question, a who, what, where, or when question. In this case, what does Brandon want? So that we're asking a W question that matches with the same part of the sentence that we were just working with, the object. What does Brandon want? Affirm it after students give you your answer. A dog. Brandon wants a dog. If you think we're done, we're only getting started. Now we get to circle another part of this statement. Let's focus on the subject. Does Muwa want a dog? Start out with a no question. No, Muwa doesn't want a dog. Brandon wants a dog. Does Muwa want a dog or does Brandon want a dog? Here's our either-or question. Now we've got another twofer. Muwa doesn't want a dog. Brandon wants a dog. Then we've got our W question. Who wants a dog? It's a W question asking for the same part of the statement we're working with, the subject. Who wants a dog? Brandon. Brandon wants a dog. Now we're going to circle whatever's left in the sentence, in this case, the verb. Ask a no question. Does Brandon lick a dog? Lick? Seriously? Hey, as long as the verb makes sense, it can be a little goofy. Your students will love it. No, make a twofer. No, that's absurd. Brandon does not lick a dog. Brandon wants a dog. Negate the incorrect understanding. Restate the original statement. Either-or question. Does Brandon lick a dog or does Brandon want a dog? Now I'm going to make a threefer. I'm going to restate the original statement, negate the incorrect understanding, and then restate the original statement again. Brandon wants a dog. Brandon does not lick a dog. Brandon wants a dog. Here's the fun part. Now I'm going to dig for a detail. I'm going to ask a question to which my students don't already know the answer to. This is a chance for them to use their imagination. This is where we get to create something together. Why does Brandon want a dog? As you can see, Circling can go on forever. It is repetitive, it is cumbersome, it is boring. So why am I making this video? As I was taught, the purpose of circling was to get in as many repetitions of the target structures as possible. From what we know about language acquisition, learners need repeated exposure to vocabulary and linguistic patterns in order to acquire them, and circling is very effective at providing repetitions. Lots and lots and lots of repetitions. Where circling falls short is in the area of interest. While it's repeating and repeating and repeating, your students are going to be dropping their heads to the tables because they are so bored. Something else that we know about language acquisition is that the message has to be compelling enough for a learner to attend to it. If a learner isn't attending to the message, they're not going to acquire the language that it contains. Circling, like I just did, actually undermines language acquisition. The best input is so compelling that the learner forgets that the message is encoded in a foreign language. But when you circle it like that, the learner is painfully aware of the fact that the message is encoded in a foreign language and it's driving them insane. Can I let you in on a little secret? The purpose of circling is not to repeat the words that you're using as many times as possible. The purpose of circling is to help your students understand the message. The purpose of circling is to help your students understand the message. When you make a statement, some of your students are probably going to understand it right away. Some of them might think that they understand it, but they're not totally sure. Others might be completely clueless. This is especially the case when the message contains words or linguistic patterns that are unfamiliar to your students, or when the information that you're trying to get across is complicated. As the communication guide, the teacher, it is your job to make sure that all of your students understand the message with confidence. Circling is one technique that you can use to make sure that all of your students get on board the comprehension train. When you make a statement that you're confident that all of your students understand, you don't have to circle it. In that case, circling would feel cumbersome, unnatural, and boring. When you make a statement that you're not confident that all of your students understand, you might circle it. But how can you tell if your students understood it or not? As the school year progresses, you'll have a handle on what words and patterns your students understand and which ones they don't. At the beginning of the year in a level 1 class, your students won't understand everything and they'll need a lot of support. Sometimes you can see it in your students' eyes that they don't understand. When you make a statement and you look at your students' eyes, you can see that flash of panic cross their eyes. Or you might see their eyes dart to the board where you've provided a written translation of the word that you just used. Another way that you might know that they don't understand is because you use a comprehension check. You ask them whether or not they understood. To learn more about comprehension checks, please visit our blog. Here's the thing. Even when your students don't understand, you are never going to run through the full circling sequence. Never run through the full circling sequence. Never run through the full circling sequence. You're going to strategically pick 1 or 2 circling questions to help your students process something that they didn't understand the first time, but never run through the whole circling sequence. You only ask as many questions as you need to help your students process the message that you're trying to convey. Let's look at circling in real life. In this story, imagine that all of these words were recently introduced to students. This is all new language. Make a statement. This is Brandon. We can assume that our students already know this. They probably learned it in the first week of school. We're not going to circle it. Brandon wants a dog. Maybe in here there's something new. I'm going to affirm it and I'm going to add a little detail for intrigue. Brandon wants a big dog. Notice how I added that extra detail. Adding in a little detail, in this case the word big, makes it just a little more interesting for students. It gives them a little bit more to chew on. Now I'm going to ask an either or question. Does Brandon want a cat or does Brandon want a dog? Notice for this, I pulled back and I eliminated that detail about size. I'm only asking about which animal he wants. Does Brandon want a cat or does Brandon want a dog? A dog, that's right. Brandon wants a dog. He wants a big dog. This is muwa. Oh my word, we're on another statement already and we only asked one circling question? You bet, my kids can handle it. Muwa has a big dog. I'm going to contrast these verbs, wants and has. Muwa has a big dog. Does Muwa have a dog? There's my yes question. Yes, affirm it. Muwa has a dog. A no question. Does Brandon have a dog? Twofer. No, Brandon does not have a dog. He wants a dog. Now we've got two separate storylines going. We've got Brandon and we've got Muwa. So I'm going to ask some circling questions to help them sort out that information. I want to make sure that they're picking up what I'm putting down. Or in this case, since it's about a dog, I want to make sure they're smelling what I'm stepping in. Who has a dog? Muwa. Who wants a dog? Brandon. Brandon wants a dog. Now, let's imagine that you're working with the same class later in the year. They already have a good bit of language at their disposal, and so you can move a lot more quickly through the story. Let's try. This is Brandon. Brandon does not have a dog, but he wants a dog. He wants a big dog. Notice, I'm not asking any questions. My students totally get this. I can just say it and move on. This is Muwa. Muwa has a big dog. Now, I am going to ask another circling question, but I'm not asking the question to help my students understand the words in the sentences because they're pretty basic and my students can handle it. I'm circling to help my students keep the story straight. Who has a dog? Muwa. Yes, that's right, guys. Muwa. Muwa has a dog. Who wants a dog? Brandon. Now, I'm going to use another really useful strategy. I'm going to recap what we've already talked about. I'm going to make sure that my students remember everything that we've talked about thus far because we've already added a good bit of information to the story. Exactly. Muwa has a big dog and Brandon wants a big dog. Now that I've recapped and I'm sure that my students are all on the same page, we're going to move forward with the story. One day, Brandon goes to Muwa's house. No need to circle that. My students have been learning that since the first month of Spanish. He sees her dog sleeping on the sofa. Sleeping on the sofa. That might be a little bit of an advanced construction for my beginning students, even though it's a little bit into the year. So I'm going to stop and ask some circling questions. Is her dog on the bed or on the sofa? I sorted out the information. There were two things going on there. There was an action and there was a location. So now I'm going to pull out the location and make sure my students get that straight with an either or question. On the sofa, yes, her dog is sleeping on the sofa. Now I'm going to bring back in that extra piece of information. Is Muwa sleeping on the sofa? No, affirm it. Muwa's dog is sleeping on the sofa. Recap again. Recap is one of your best friends. Brandon goes to Muwa's house and sees her dog. It is sleeping on the sofa. You can see how I moved quickly through most of the story as it was using simple language structures. Then when I got to a part of the story, I paused because I wasn't sure if my students would understand that piece of language, and I asked a couple circling questions to help them process it. Asking some circling questions helps students to process the message. Does it help students to process the message, or does it help students to hear the message?